Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us in our presentation today about Ekadashi. Today we'll try to learn many different aspects of Ekadashi that you may not have heard before, and hopefully it will inspire you to continue or to start fasting on Ekadashi. So before we begin, I'd like to offer my obeisances unto Nityalapa Vishtom Vishnupada Stotra Shishimad Bhakti Vedant Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and also say millions of obeisances unto the lotus feet of Nityalapa Vishtom Vishnupad Astotra Shishimad Bhakti Vedant Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And I pray for their mercy that whatever we discuss today, let it be just a repetition of their words. So, what are we going to be discussing today? Well, today we'll talk about what is Ekadashi actually, because many of us don't know why we should fast on Ekadashi. What is it exactly? And maybe is it just for the Hare Krishnas or just for the certain people? No, it's for everyone, as we will learn. We'll learn about why we should fast from a scientific perspective. What are the benefits to our body and to our health? And also from a yogic and spiritual perspective, which is, of course, the main reason. And we'll learn about what do we gain from doing Ekadashi? Is there anything in it for me? And what do we lose? Oftentimes we talk about only the gains, but there are also some things we will lose on Ekadashi. And hopefully it will provide you an inspiration on how we can do Ekadashi, that we should do Ekadashi, and we should instruct others to do Ekadashi as well. So, first of all, what is Ekadashi? So Ekadashi here, it means 11, Ekadashi, right? Ek in Hindi means 1, and dash or das means 10. So 1 plus 10 equals 11. And Ekadashi comes twice a month on the 11th day of the fortnight of the moon. So there are two, the moon phase every 30 days is split up into two phases. One is called Shukla Paksha and another is called Krishna Paksha. And the 11th day is called Ekadashi. Many of us might have heard so many of these other days or tithis, like for example, Narsing Chaturdasi or Nityananda Trayodashi or Advaita Saptami, Ram Navami, Krishna Janmashtami. So these are all representing different numbers of the days of the cycle of the moon. So Ekadashi comes on average twice per month, and it occurs on the 11th day of the moon cycle. Another thing is that on Ekadashi, many people ask, well, what is it exactly we should fast from? So on this day, one should, according to the scriptures, observe a complete fast from food and water. It's also known as nirjal, right? But for many of us, that is very, very difficult. And our acharyas have given us a little bit of a concession that we should simply fast from grains and beans and leafy vegetables and many other things of that nature. So we will discuss what exactly we should fast from, but essentially we should understand, well, Ekadashi falls on the 11th day of the cycle of the moon. You may have heard many devotees referring to Ekadashi in different ways. For example, in the bhajan by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Shuddha Bhakta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is writing, Madhavatithi Bhakti Janani Jatane Palan Kari Krishna Vasati Vasati Boli Paramayananda Bari. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is referring to Madhavatithi Bhakti Janani. So these are different names for Ekadashi. It is known as Madhav Tithi. Well, why Madhav Tithi? Well, obviously Madhav is in the name. What is another name for Krishna is Madhav. And Tithi means auspicious day, right? Auspicious day. So Ekadashi is that auspicious day that Krishna himself or Madhav himself becomes. See, Krishna, he declares himself in Bhagavad Gita in so many different ways. For example, I am this mountain, or I am the sound Om, or I am the ocean amongst all bodies of water. So many things he declares himself. Well, in the scriptures, he also declares himself as Ekadashi day. So he takes present, that is the day of Krishna, where it's actually himself, actually him. So that is why we give it so much honor. And what does Bhakti Janani mean? Janani means mother. So here Ekadashi, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur is stating, that Ekadashi is the mother of devotion. What does a mother do? As we all know, a mother is one who nourishes us, one who protects us, and one who continuously watches over us for our ultimate growth and benefit. So similarly, when we fast on Ekadashi, or when we honor the mother of devotion, then she in turn also nourishes us, protects us, and helps us grow on the path of bhakti. And lastly, it is also known as Hari Vasara. What does that mean? That Hari Vas, Hari takes presence or takes entrance and stays in that day, right? So Krishna, he enters this day, just like Madhav Tithi, also Hari Vasara. And the scriptures even declare that Ekadashi is even more powerful and more important than Janmashtami, the day of Krishna's birth. See, many of us in India or many of us here in the West, we all fast on Janmashtami, or we think that is the most important day of the year. But no, our scriptures declare that Ekadashi is even superior to Janmashtami. And when we fast and we do bhajan on Ekadashi, then Krishna is even more pleased. So our goal on Ekadashi is to do upavas. Upavas means, many people think it means just fasting, but no, upavas. We want to be nearer or closer to Ekadashi or Madhav or Krishna. So some people wonder, well, why should we fast in the first place? I mean, there's so many things we need to do. We should chant, we should read the scriptures, we should associate with devotees. Why do we have to fast? Well, first, let's talk about it from a scientific perspective, because many of us are convinced when we see modern science these days, even though that modern science is actually coming from the scriptures alone. But we'll see how the scientists have really matched exactly what the scriptures have said thousands and thousands of years ago. So while before they used to say we should eat to our heart's content, now everyone is talking about the glories of fasting. And in fact, it has been glorified so much that people have won Nobel Prizes for it. And our Srila Prabhupada, he has made this quote very famous, that religion without philosophy is sentimentalism, and while philosophy without religion is just mental speculation. What does that mean? That means just if we do something because we are religious or we want to do it for our religion, that is very good. But if we don't understand why and what the benefits are, then it's just a feeling. Somebody may come along in the future, one of your friends or colleagues, and question you, why do you fast or why do you do that? And you say, oh, well, it's because I'm trying to follow my religion. But that's not convincing enough, and they may challenge you. And if you don't know why, or you don't have strong scriptural and scientific evidence to back it up, then you may also lose faith. Therefore, Prabhupada says we must have both religion, which means a desire to follow our path, and we should also understand why. We should understand the philosophy behind it. So that way, it's not just mental speculation and guessing as to why we do the things we do. So first, I'm going to talk about this very famous scientific experiment, which was done in 2016. And it was done by a very famous Japanese scientist, Yoshinori Osumi. And what did he find? He found that our cells, when we fast, benefit tremendously. And when we fast, after a 36-hour period, our body goes through a process called autophagy. So what's autophagy? Well, autophagy, it's a complicated word, but it actually means very simple. It's basically where our cells, you can see this cell right here, eats all of the sort of unused junk that is all around the cells that develops over time. So for example, in your garage, you might throw the trash, but then you also throw some stuff all around the trash can because it gets over full. And then it slowly builds up, and you just don't get rid of the trash. Then spring comes around and you say, you know what, it's time for us to clean up the trash. And you gather all the junk and you stuff it back in the bin. Similarly, junk like these guys builds up over time in our bloodstream near our cells. We feed it food. Sometimes it's not the most healthiest food. And we go through stresses and so many other things. And so there's junk that builds up all around these cells over time. Well, when we finally say, okay, enough's enough, I'm not going to continuously feed my body with junk food or anything unhealthy or living a stressful lifestyle, then what our cells do is say, okay, well, I've got nothing else to eat. Let me get rid of and eat all of the junk around us. So what does that do? It gives us so many benefits. It slows down the aging process. It also gives a positive impact on cell renewal. So you can think of autophagy as cells eating themselves, like recycling or like doing spring cleaning in your garage. So this famous study was done by a Japanese scientist, and he won the Nobel Prize. Can you believe that? The top honor in science was given to a person that basically what our scriptures have been telling us for years. Next, there's another study done in 2009, which was related to our DNA. This one's a little more complicated, so I won't get into so much depth. But if you'd like to research, in 2009, this experiment was done, and it also won the Nobel Prize, where it talked about how the DNA deterioration slows down when we do some fasting. And what's funny is it came to the same conclusion that if we fasted for 36 hours, we would experience a tremendous amount of benefits. And of course, many of us, myself included, would love for us to look young, feel young, and live a lot longer, healthier life. So that's a couple of examples of science, but we also can see amongst mainstream media, the health world, the medical world, and also the yogic world about the benefits of fasting. For example, in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it's described that those who eat meat, those who eat meat should fast 1 month out of the entire year from meat. Isn't that very interesting? If we look at the world's religions, such as Christianity or Islam, what do they do for 1 month out of the year? For Christians, it's Lent, and for Muslims, it's Ramadan, where they fast for a significant amount of time, and they fast from certain things for 1 month. Isn't that interesting? That's our Patanjali Yoga Sutras have said that also for hundreds and thousands of years. Similarly, those who are already vegetarian, what should they do to give the body a rest? They should fast every 2 weeks. Doesn't that line up exactly with Ekadashi? So what they say is that when we give our body a rest, when we give our stomachs a rest, it allows for the stomach to relax and get a break. Just like if you go to the gym for weeks and weeks straight, your body gets tighter and tighter and it gets more and more difficult to do. So that's why it's recommended that you take some rest days. Similarly, if we take some rest days, our stomach and our body relaxes and gains even more energy than when we just continuously eat. Another thing is that there's many famous, YouTubers, and this is a very famous doctor here in the US, Pradeep Jamnadas, who talks about the glories of fasting. And what's interesting, he says that one should fast to live, not live to fast. So fasting actually helps us live longer, better lives, clearer mental picture, better health, all the different benefits that the medical community is finding when we fast. So he talks over and over about the power of fasting. And of course, he has millions of followers that do it. Now, devotees, on the other hand, are more interested in the spiritual perspective. We want to know what the benefits are for fasting, but more importantly, why does this please Krishna, and how can this increase our bhakti towards him? So what do we gain from doing Ekadashi? Well, in bhakti, there's a famous quote, because nothing worth having comes easy. Read that again. Because nothing worth having comes easy. What does that mean? That means that if you want something that's worth having, it never will come that easy. There's always a bit of work, always a bit of obstacles that come in our way. And bhakti, as we all know, reading the scriptures, reading the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, that what is that worth having? What is the thing most worth having, right? That is bhakti or prem for Krishna, for Srimati Radhika. This is the thing worth having. That is the only thing worth having. So do we expect something so high, something so glorious, something so incredible to come so easily? No. That's how we will value it. That's how we will develop love towards Krishna, is that we do some austerity for him, do something that pleases him. So Krishna says, if we do Ekadashi, fasting is a fast path to bhakti. And Ekadashi is glorified over and over in our scriptures in so many different ways. Let's take some examples. For example, it's mentioned in the Puranas that the day of Ekadashi can fulfill all of the desires of every human being. Now, let's think about what is the true desire. Our Srila Gurudev and Srila Prabhupada used to say that the only desire in a devotee's heart should be, how do I serve Krishna? How do I please him? How do I ultimately make him happy? Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena Krishna anushiranam bhaktir uttama. That the topmost thing that we should desire, that we should want, is bhakti. And the only way to get it is if we constantly engage in serving Krishna for his pleasure, for making him happy. Furthermore, if we know Lord Chaitanya or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, we know of his own giving his own example on how to honor and respect Ekadashi. Lord Chaitanya, being Krishna himself in the form of a devotee, did follow Ekadashi and instructed his disciples to follow Ekadashi. In fact, there's a very famous story where the devotees were wondering what to do with the prasadam that was grains on Ekadashi day. And Mahaprabhu did a very beautiful pastime of doing parikarma, or circumambulating the prasad and then honoring it the next day. So in this way, he honored the prasad and he also kept the vow of Ekadashi. And did you know that even Nanda Maharaj, Krishna's father, fasted on Ekadashi as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam? Now, there are many other numerous stories about Ekadashi. For example, Ambarish Maharaj, which is a very famous story depicted in the picture on the right, and his encounter with Durvasa Muni, and how Ambarish Maharaj, though he was under some pressure to break his vow for the sake of Durvasa Muni's appearance in his kingdom, still, no matter what, after consulting with his gurus and the Brahmins, what he should do, he maintained his Ekadashi and never broke it, despite almost being cursed and ruined. But instead, Krishna protected him fully and instead chastised Durvasa Muni to the point where Durvasa had to ask for forgiveness from Ambarish Maharaj. So being very committed, being very strict about our Ekadashi results in the pleasure and the happiness of Krishna. He sees this and he becomes happy. Similarly, there's a very famous story of Maharaj Rukmangada and Mohini Devi. So many of us may not know this story, but Maharaj Rukmangada was a very famous king and a very wealthy king. But what was the rule? In his kingdom, he had one rule, in that everyone had to follow Ekadashi. Can you imagine how glorious and pious that ruler was, that enforced the fasting of Ekadashi for every citizen in his kingdom? Every time Ekadashi came, there would be bells and announcements made. Everyone should fast for Ekadashi. Everyone should fast for Ekadashi, and all the residents would comply. So one day, Yamaraj in the kingdom of hell, he was noticing, wow, so few people are coming to hell. What is happening? Why has my population in hell gone down so much? So he went to Lord Brahma and he asked Brahma, what is happening these days? Nobody is coming to hell anymore. And Lord Brahma replied that, oh, this is because in the kingdom of Maharaj Rukmangada, Ekadashi fasting is mandatory. And as a result, everyone is following Ekadashi and they are going to Vaikuntha. There is no need for them to go to hell because they are pleasing Krishna. Then Yamaraj began worried and said, what if everyone leaves and no one ever comes to hell again? So Brahma came up with a plan and he manifested Mohini Devi, a very beautiful woman. So this woman attracted Maharaj Rukmangada one day and Maharaj Rukmangada proposed marriage to her. But the woman said, there is only one condition, that you must follow everything I say if you want to be married to me. Being enamored by the beauty of Mohini Devi, Maharaj Rukmangada agreed, and they lived in the kingdom. After some time, Maharaj Rukmangada retired and took his wife Mohini Devi to the forest and left the kingdom in the care of his son. So, when they reached the forest, a few days later, Ekadashi Tithi came. And, of course, the announcement was made that everyone should follow Ekadashi. Upon hearing that, Mohini Devi said, oh, king, I want you to stop this practice. There should be no more enforcement of Ekadashi in your kingdom. Maharaj said, what? Please, Devi, ask me anything else, but please do not ask me to give up Ekadashi. She said, no, you have promised me that on the condition of this marriage, you will follow my order. You will follow anything I ask you for. So Maharaj Rukmangada was in a great dilemma. And his son heard about this. His son heard that his father was in a dilemma and he came rushing to the forest. He said, mother, mother, please do not ask my father for this wish. Anything else we can give you, but please do not ask him to break Ekadashi and for us to stop that in the kingdom. Then the mother Mohini Devi replied, okay, I will only accept this on the condition that your father, Maharaj Rukmangada, will chop your head off and kill you. The son said, oh, mother, I'll be very happy to accept this. And he said, father, immediately grab your sword and you can remove my head. There is nothing I'm worried about in this life. You should maintain your promise of Ekadashi. The father grudgingly went to grab his sword, and just as he was about to sever the head from his son, Lord Brahma appeared and Yamaraj appeared. And they said, oh king, stop, stop. There is no need for you to do this. We are very pleased with your commitment. And Lord Vishnu then appeared and said, from now on, king, you no longer need to worry about this. Now your time here in this material world is over and you should at once come to Vaikuntha with me. So Maharaj Rukmangada, another example of being very drid, very firm on keeping Ekadashi, and look how he received the darshan of Lord Vishnu and ultimately went to Vaikuntha and sent his citizens to Vaikuntha. We mentioned about Lord Chaitanya, and there are many glorifications from Vyasadeva, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam and all of our scriptures, on the glories of Ekadashi. So many people ask, well, there's so many things we gain from Ekadashi, but what do we lose from it? Lose? I thought there were only gains. No, actually there's so many things we lose from doing Ekadashi too. So we must be conscious about that. And what are those things that we lose? Well, we lose the things that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, that are anarthas, or unwanted things. For example, kam, krodh, mad, moh, lobh, matsarya. All of these unwanted things like lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, attachment, delusion. These things go away from Ekadashi. How is fasting from food going to help us in controlling our anger or controlling our lust? Well, as we can see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states that if we can control our senses and control our attachment to the sense objects, then we don't experience lust. And what does lust lead to? It leads to attachment, which leads to anger, which leads to delusion, which leads to bewilderment, loss of memory, and ultimately falling down again in the cycle of birth and death. So if we restrain our senses, like our tongue, just as Sri Rupa Goswami states in Upadeshamrit, Vacho vegam manaso krodha vegam, jiva vegam udra upasta vegam, right? What is he saying? That one should control the tongue both in speaking and in enjoyment or taking foodstuffs that are pleasurable. And if we control our senses and engage in Krishna consciousness or fix our consciousness on Krishna, then this is a man of steady intelligence. And we are no longer going to have these anarthas. So Krishna not only tells us that Ekadashi is the fast path to bhakti to him, he's also telling us that it slowly gets rid of our anarthas. Just like when you go into a room, right? If you go into a dark room, do you go and you take a bucket and try to scoop out the darkness from the room? No, that makes no sense. What do? You just turn on the light switch and automatically the darkness goes away. Similarly, by fasting on Ekadashi, by turning on that light switch, not only does the light or the happiness or the pleasure of bhakti come in our life, it also removes this darkness or unwanted things. So it is really, truly a fast path to bhakti. So many ask, especially those who are not following Ekadashi currently, how do we follow it? Is it just fasting from grains, beans, and leafy vegetables? No, it is so much more. And we must plan and think about Ekadashi. In fact, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that one should, the day before Ekadashi, plan and remember and prepare for Ekadashi to come. Well, how can we do this? Well, we can say, oh, because I'm not engaging my tongue in my own sense pleasure, my own satisfaction, I'll have some time. I'll have some extra time. Sure, we may be busy with work or so many other activities, but there will be some extra time because our whole day will not be spent on just eating and cooking and doing all these things. We can utilize that time and we can prepare saying, with this extra time, I will chant some extra rounds. I will read the scriptures. I will cook prasad for the pleasure of the deities. The deities, Radha and Krishna, can eat grains. There's no need for them to fast for Ekadashi, right? It's for us, for sadhakas, to fast. So on the day before, we can plan. And on the day of, we should try to remember that it is not just simply controlling the senses, it is also engaging them. So we should control our tongue from our own enjoyment and then engage our tongue in the chanting of the holy name or reading of the scriptures or so on, glorifying the devotees, right? We should utilize our tongue for that. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also gave a very nice instruction for Ekadashi. He said that on Ekadashi, it should be like a day of reflection for us. For the devotee, he should reflect that, oh, in the past 2 weeks, have I made progress in my path? Have I made progress on my sadhan bhajan? Right? Just like a businessman, every once in a while, he goes to his books and he says, how much profit have I made? Did I come out ahead or did I come in a loss? Or am I just staying the same? Am I just breaking even? Similarly, this Ekadashi Tithi gives an opportunity for us as a practitioner, as a sadhaka, to reflect upon our bhajan, our practice. So if we note down these days in our heart and reflect and then say, okay, in the next 2 weeks, I will do better. I will progress. I will start something new. Then by taking the blessings and the mercy of Ekadashi, we can really gain some spiritual strength. And finally, one should be conscious that we should do paran, or breaking the fast, with either prasad of a grain, ideally Jagannath prasad, for example, but we should break our fast, or if you're doing nirjal, then water, charnamrit, then we break our fast or do our paran on the right time. If you're wondering what time you need to do that, then you can go to purebhakti.com/calendar. That's purebhakti.com/calendar. You can enter your time zone and you can enter your city and look up the calendar days and then find out what time you should break your fast. And there are so many other calendars that are done by our Vaishnav community, and you can follow that. But it is very important to break your fast on time according to the time of your local jurisdiction. Make sure you follow that, because the sun and the moon is changing depending on the location, and we need to follow those cycles to break our fast. So many people might ask, does Krishna become happy when we are fasting? Does he somehow derive some sort of pleasure when we are fasting or not filling our bellies to the heart's content? No, that is not the case. In fact, it's just the opposite. Krishna, being extremely merciful to the jivas of this world and always hankering and trying to find a way to bring them to him, decided that one day I will become that day. I will become Ekadashi Tithi. And all one has to do is fast and remember me. And in that way, I will take care of their karma. I will take care of their anarthas. I will bring them on this path of bhakti that will ultimately lead to me and their own eternal happiness. So in fact, Krishna is extremely merciful. He wants us to remember him so that he can bring us to him, right? It's not the other way around where he's trying to punish us or make us suffer. In fact, if we simply think on Ekadashi day that the goal is not to think about food, not to think about all these different material things that give us this sense pleasure or satisfaction. Instead, if we are thinking of feeding our soul, after all, we are the soul, not the body. And as it is said, Jivera Suruphoy, Krishnera Nityadas, right? That the servant, we are the eternal servant of Krishna. So by engaging in Krishna consciousness, we are feeding our soul, not the body. One day, every 2 weeks, we can take the time to say, I will not feed my body. I will not look after my body because it is just the body. Instead, I will look after my soul, who I really am, and try to identify myself with the soul. And what was the soul? What is the food for the soul? That is bhakti. That is sadhana bhajan. That is the ultimate food that we nourish our soul with, that will grow our creeper of bhakti, the bhakti lata, right? That's what we ultimately want. And if we utilize our time to engage the senses in serving Krishna, then ultimately we'll get through this cycle of birth and death and finally get the opportunity to serve Krishna. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation about Ekadashi. If anything I have said that is good, it's only because I'm repeating the words of Srila Gurudev and Srila Prabhupada. And if anything I have made a mistake, I request that you please forgive me. Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Ekadashi Tithi ki jai, Madhav Tithi ki jai, Bhakti Janani ki jai.